The gym can be intimidating. Everyone there is jacked, you probably don't know what to do, and you're afraid that you'll look stupid. Or worse, get hurt. But most of that disappears with a little bit of preparation. In this video, I'll show you exactly what to do before and during your first workout so that you can walk into the gym with confidence. Man, it's a little bit too hot still. The first tip is you want to be prepared before you even set foot in the gym. There are a few things before you hit the gym that you want to make sure that you prepare for. The first is a workout routine. Now, a lot of old school people write down what they want to do in the gym in a notebook. And although this is effective, there are a lot better ways to do it now. I'd recommend getting an app on your phone. There are a ton of workout apps that you can use, and a lot of them will even have routines for you. You don't need to have anything too extensive here yet. Eventually, you do want to dial in your routine and have one optimal for muscle growth, but at this stage, default one that's in an app is going to do just fine for you. If you're confused and wondering what routine that you should be following, I made a whole video about it. If you want to check that out, it's right here. But regardless, you want to know what exercises you're doing before you hit the gym, and that way you're not just showing up confused and winging it. Aside from this, you also want to know what the form looks like for each exercise. So what I recommend doing here is going on YouTube and searching up each exercise that you're wanting to do, and then finding a video on the form of that exercise. Not only watch it before you go to the gym, but also save it to a playlist so that when you're at the gym, you can quickly bring it up and rewatch the video so that you're following the proper cues and knowing what to look out for when you're doing an exercise. This is going to, one, make it so that you don't look stupid when you're doing an exercise. It makes it look like you know what you're doing. And it also is going to prevent you from getting hurt in the gym. Another thing you want to do before you hit the gym is make sure that you have decent clothing for the gym. I've seen a few people before that just show up in jeans, and not only do you look out of place, but you also aren't going to be able to move as freely as you would if you had proper workout clothing. So I definitely recommend picking those up and a good water bottle before you even think about going to a gym. Aside from this, you also want to do some research. You might be in a little more of a budget stage of life, and you don't want to show up to a gym that has a membership that is hundreds of dollars a month and then not be able to afford it. But you also could be in a stage of life that you can afford a little more bougie of a gym, and you don't want to go to some gym that's like $15 a month and not enjoy going to it. So make sure you do your research on the gyms in your area, and then find one that's within your budget and that you think you will enjoy going to. Now, another thing that you want to do before a workout is make sure that you're eating the correct macronutrients and eating at the correct time. I'm assuming you don't know what a macronutrient is yet, and in simple terms, it's a nutrient that your body needs in large amounts. They're your proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Before a workout, you want to focus on getting some carbohydrates in, and then a little bit of protein as well. This could be rice and chicken, oats and berries mixed with milk and protein. Typically, what I like doing when I'm in a bulk and trying to put on weight is to have toast with peanut butter and honey. I typically have this about an hour before a workout. I find this is a sweet spot, as if you have it later, you're still going to be digesting it when you're at the gym. And this sometimes makes me feel kind of shitty. And if you have it any earlier, it's going to be too early to really fuel your workout, not have the effects that you're anticipating it to have.
Always first at the finish line. At the finish line.
Now, the next tip is for when you actually get to the gym. Now, this one's kind of a given, but you will want to get a gym membership as soon as you walk in the door. Usually there's a desk at the front of the gym. I've been in a lot of different gyms, and one of the main questions I ask when I get a gym membership or like a day pass or something is where the change rooms are. There's a lot of like multi-floor gyms, and sometimes they're impossible to find. So you might want to ask the employee who's working at the gym where the change room is. Another thing to keep in mind is machine placement in gyms. So a lot of gyms are organized with cardio in one section, and then like a stretching area, group class area, and a weight area. Now, with the weights, they're kind of broken down further into like subdivisions. So you'll have a area where all your squat racks are, and all like the leg equipment, and then the chest equipment, back equipment, shoulder equipment, and then all the free weights. So once you get an idea of where each muscle group is in your gym, then it's not too complicated to find a machine, just because if you're doing a shoulder exercise, the machine's typically over in the shoulder section. That said though, sometimes all the equipment doesn't fit in nicely in a gym. So if you ever can't find something, I always go and ask the staff or another member. That's what the staff are there for, to help you out. So don't be afraid to ask them where a certain machine is. And honestly, if you don't know how to use a machine, make sure to ask the staff about that too, as it's not always the same as what you're going to see on the internet. A lot of machines are built differently, and there might be different adjustments that are not easy to understand. So sometimes you have to ask. A lot of the time, though, it's straightforward. Before hitting the weights, though, you want to make sure that you're warming up. Typically, what I do is like a 10-minute general warm-up on a treadmill or a Stairmaster. This just gets the blood flowing, and then I'll go do a dynamic warm-up. So a lot of mistake that a lot of people make is static stretching before a workout. This can actually hurt your performance when it comes to weightlifting, so you want to avoid that. When I say static stretching, I mean the type of stretching that you think of when you think of stretching. For instance, like doing the splits or touching your toes or anything like that, where you're getting in a position and then holding that stretch for a period of time. What I recommend doing instead of that, and what I personally do, is a dynamic warm-up. So what that looks like is different movements that put my joints and muscles through a full range of motion. This brings blood flow into them and then gets them ready for the workout. Think about swinging your arms in a circle. That's a good example of a dynamic warm-up, along with a few other things. Typically, when you get it more advanced, you want to target the muscles that you're working. However, when you're beginning, you typically want to do full body, and that means you have to warm everything up. So what I recommend doing is looking up a full body dynamic warm-up routine and then sticking to that before hitting the weights. Now, once you're done warming up, you want to start with compound lifts. Now, if you don't know what a compound lift is, it's any exercise that involves multiple joints and muscle groups. So think your dips or your pull-ups, bench press, squat, deadlifts. These are the most taxing on your system, so you want to make sure that you do these first before you exhaust yourself and end up doing them with poor form. Before doing any compound lift, you want to make sure that you do some warm-up sets. So what I typically do on the ones that aren't so challenging is I will do one with just the bar and then one with 50% of the working weight. So if I'm doing 200 pounds, then I'll do one with the bar and then one with 100 pounds. Now, for the ones that are complex, I will add in another warm-up set of 75% of my working weight. So again, if I'm doing 200 pounds, I do a third set at 150 pounds. After those warm-up sets are done, then I'll start with my working weight. As a beginner, you want to start light and perfect your form before adding a whole bunch of weight to the bar. This is going to help you avoid injury. Another thing when it comes to compound lifts they're very technical. So you want to make sure that you're rewatching the video on the form, and that way you know what to look out for when you're doing the exercise. I'd even go so far to rewatch the video in between each set, and that way you can focus on the cues when you're doing this set and you're not forgetting anything. Now, a good workout program has a few compound lifts throughout it. However, they should also have some isolation lifts for those muscles that don't directly get targeted by the compound lifts, and help assist bring up muscles that don't grow as easily. So for me, I always hit my arms with a couple isolation exercises on their particular day, or I'll hit my delts. Same with back. I do a lot of isolation for my back just to bring it up because it's a little farther behind than my chest and everything. After your workout is over, you also want to do a cool down. It doesn't have to be anything too extensive. I'd recommend doing some static stretching and some foam rolling. Again, if you forget, static stretching is this type of stretching that you think of when you think of stretching. So like touching your toes or doing the splits. Your muscles are going to be warmed up so you can safely do these, and you're not going to affect your hypertrophy as you already did your lifts. So this is a good time to do that. And then doing some foam rolling, if you feel comfortable doing it, is also a good idea. If you're someone who's wanting to do some cardio alongside weightlifting, then I'd also do this after the workout. A quick warm up, like I said before workout is great, but you don't want to exhaust yourself doing cardio if your focus is on weightlifting. So I typically do a little bit after my workout's over, just because I am on a cut and trying to lose weight. So this helps me reach that goal. Now, step number 4 is how to improve and optimize what you're doing. For starters, you shouldn't just go to the gym and do random things every time you work out. You want to make sure, like what I said before, that you have a plan in place and are following that plan every time you go to the gym. The main reason why you want to track though is so that you can ensure that you hit progressive overload. What you want to do to follow progressive overload is increase either the weight, reps, or sets every week that you do an exercise. So if this week I bench 200 pounds, next week I'd bench 205, or I'd increase the sets or the reps at 200 pounds. If you don't track, you're not going to be able to know how much you lifted last week though, so you won't be able to increase the weight this week. So that's why it's so important to track, is so that every week that you do an exercise, you know what you did last week and then can incorporate progressive overload in this week's workout. I recommend sticking to the same routine for at least 3 months. After this 3 months is over, you might find your routines getting boring and not very challenging for you. So if that's the case, then I recommend switching it up. I recommend doing a 3-day per week program for the first 3 months, and then after that you can grow into a 4 or even 5-day program, and this will help you get over a plateau if you are plateauing. A mistake that a lot of people make when they go to the gym is they skip mobility. I look at mobility like brushing your teeth. If you miss it once, it's not going to be a big deal, especially if nobody's around you and you can't notice your stinky breath. But if you do it consistently, that's when it leads to long-term issues. So you want to make sure that you're incorporating it into your routine and are doing it consistently. This is why I like doing a little bit before and after workout, as it seems like less of a chore than it does spending 10-20 minutes doing mobility all at once. If you do it with your workouts, it's not only going to optimize your workouts, but it's also going to make it a lot easier to stay consistent with your routine. As if you're going to the gym already with the purpose of lifting weights, and you attach mobility to that, you're kind of habit stacking and making the habit a lot easier to do consistently. Another big mistake that a lot of people make too is they don't put enough or put too much effort into their workouts. I've kind of had the issue on both ends. I've spent time not working out hard enough and kind of just going through the motions. This obviously isn't going to lead to optimal muscle growth, but I've also had it too where I went too hard during a group of workouts and have exhausted myself before the workout's over, or I have even injured myself from doing an exercise to the point where my form has broken down. So what I do and what I recommend doing is not doing a set past technical failure. So basically what technical failure is where your technique breaks down because your muscles are exhausted. So as soon as I'm doing an exercise and I get to a rep where my form is starting to break down, that's when I call it quits. If I keep going, I'm going to end up injuring myself. Now, you don't have to do this every time, and honestly, it's probably not optimal to go to technical failure on every single set. However, you want to make sure that you're going within 1 to 2 to 3 reps of technical failure, depending on whether you're doing a compound lift or an isolation lift. A mistake that I've made in the past is if my workout program says do 12 reps, 3 sets, then every set I'll only go to 12 reps, even if I have 5 or 6 reps left in me. And this is something that you definitely want to avoid. Another thing with working out is you want to make sure it's consistent. Going 3 times for an hour each is a lot better than going once for 3 hours. So you definitely want to make sure you're hitting the gym consistently. If that's something you struggle with, then I definitely recommend joining my free fitness accountability group. It's over on Discord. I'll drop the link for that down in the description of this video. There's a bunch of guys in there and it's been very active lately. So I definitely recommend joining that. Link for that will be down in the description of this video. Now, the last piece of advice that I have for you is based upon what you should be eating. You can train all you want, but you're not going to see results if you're not dieting correctly. There are typically 3 ways that you can diet, and they're all dependent on your goal. The first one is recomposition. This means that you don't gain or lose any weight. You're basically just building muscle and losing fat at the same time. Now, one caveat to this is, aside from beginners or people taking steroids, you're not really going to have much luck with this. It's going to be pretty difficult. So that's why a lot of people will bulk or cut. Bulking means you put on weight, and then cutting means you're losing weight. Now, I don't really give a shit what the fancy fad diet is on Instagram or what supplement you need to take for fat loss. That's all just a scam. Honestly, the only way you're going to ever lose weight or gain weight is based on a calorie surplus or deficit. Everybody burns a certain amount of calories each and every day. This is known as your calorie expenditure. If you want to maintain weight, then you need to eat at a caloric maintenance, which is eating the same amount of calories that you burn. If you want to lose weight, you need to be in a deficit, which means that you eat less calories than what you burn. And if you want to gain weight, then you need to be in a surplus, which means you eat more calories than what you burn. You want to make sure you're eating the correct amount of calories for the amount of weight that you want to gain or lose. I recommend only doing a surplus or a deficit in 250 calories. Any more than that is going to be a little aggressive. The other thing to keep in mind is protein. You want to be eating 1 gram per pound of body weight. This is going to be optimal for muscle growth. If you eat any less, you're either going to lose muscle or not gain as much muscle as you possibly can. So definitely make sure that your protein stays up. Diet is a whole nother ball game on its own. So that's why I made a whole nother video on it. So if you want to check that out, make sure to click on this video right here. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel.